Hello, my name is Andy Friedman. I'm an attorney with Friedman, Rosenwasser, and Goldbaum. Today we're going to talk about buying a franchise in the United States. To begin, I'd like to briefly describe the laws that regulate franchise in the United States. Under the Federal Trade Commission rule on franchising, a franchisor must provide the disclosure document known as a Franchise Disclosure Document, or FDD, at least 14 calendar days before the franchisee pays any money to the franchisor, or 14 calendar days before the franchisee signs a binding contract with the franchisor. So basically, the federal law is a disclosure law, and that's it. At the state level, we have two different types of franchise laws. The first are registration laws. There are approximately 15 states in the United States that require a franchisor to register their franchise with a state agency. The other types of franchise laws at the state level are relationship laws, and those govern to a certain extent the relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. Some states prohibit a franchisor from terminating a franchisee without good cause or without a certain period of time to allow the franchisee to cure an alleged default. Now let's briefly talk about some of the different types of franchises that you can buy. In the United States, there are over 5,000 different types of franchises that you can buy. There are franchises in the financial services sector, retail sector, children's products and services, business-to-business franchises, business-to-consumer franchises, there are part-time franchises, full-time franchises, home-based franchises, etc. So you have a lot of options to choose from. There are also several different business models that the franchisor might offer, and they are as follows. The simplest form or model is a single unit franchise agreement where a franchisee is granted the right to operate a business usually from a fixed location or within a fixed geographic territory. That would be a single franchise, one unit. Some franchisors offer a franchisee the opportunity to buy multiple franchises, and those are called multi-unit franchises. Another model, which is very popular, is area development rights. Under area development agreements, the franchisee/area developer is granted the right to open up multiple franchises within a geographic territory and or to sell franchises on behalf of the franchisor in that territory and to provide training and support to the franchisees in that territory for a percentage of the franchise fees and royalty fees. So, for example, a franchisor might grant a franchisee the right to be the area developer for the greater Atlanta metro area. And typically the franchisee would be required to open one unit on their own and then try to sell franchises to prospects within that territory. And the franchisor will have the direct relationship with the franchisee. So the contract is between the franchisor and the franchisee, but the area developer will share in the initial franchise fee and the ongoing royalty fees. The percentage allocation among the franchisor and the franchisee will differ in various systems. Another business model is called sub-franchising or master franchising. Now that's usually reserved for international expansion. However, there are some franchise systems in the United States that permit sub-franchising. Under a sub-franchise relationship, the franchisee or sub-franchisor actually stands in the shoes of the franchisor, and they would be required to comply with the franchise disclosure requirements under the federal rule, as well as providing all of the initial training and the ongoing support for franchisees in that territory. The difference here is the contract in a sub-franchise relationship is between the sub-franchisor and the franchisee and not with the franchisor. So the disadvantage to the franchisor is they have less control over the relationship with its franchisee. There are a couple of franchisors in the United States that use this business model. I know Fantastic Sam's does this. JanPro International and some of the other commercial janitorial companies use this business model. So when you're looking at a franchise in the United States, that's one option that might be available. So how do you begin to investigate buying a franchise? Well, there's different ways. You can go on the internet and find franchises. You might be traveling around the country and come upon a particular franchise concept that you like or you think is popular, and you say to yourself, well, I'd like to own one of those franchises. Well, I submit that's not really the best way to go about buying a franchise. One good way to investigate buying a franchise is through the use of franchise brokers. Franchise brokers actually are representing the franchisor and are paid by the franchisor. So that does not cost you anything to work with a franchise broker who will help you find a franchise that is suitable for your budget, for your lifestyle, and for the type of business that you want to operate. Some of the more popular franchise brokers are FranNet and Entrepreneur Source, although there are many others. Another way to start your franchise search is to go to the IFA website, the International Franchise Association. That is the leading franchise trade association. So once you have selected a franchise that you're really interested in, whether it's through a franchise broker or on your own, let's talk about the steps that you'll go through between finding a franchise and actually signing the franchise agreement. So the process starts with probably your initial contact to the franchisor. That could have been at a trade show, it could have been just an email from their website, or it could have been through a franchise broker. In any event, that will start the quote process. One of the first things the franchisor will do is they may send you some fancy marketing material about their franchise, but they'll also probably send you at that time the franchise disclosure document that I mentioned earlier, the FDD. When you receive the FDD, that will be a good resource for you to do your due diligence and investigate this particular franchise in more detail. I have a separate video on how to read and understand the franchise disclosure document, so be sure to look through that. I'm not going to take time today to go through the entire process of reviewing and understanding the franchise disclosure document. So once you do get the franchise disclosure document, one of the items of information that the franchisor is required to provide to you is a list of all of the franchisees in that franchise system, as well as those franchisees that left the system within 10 weeks of the date of the franchise disclosure document. This is really important information for you to use, because I will tell you that the best source of doing your due diligence on a particular franchise is to speak with as many existing and former franchisees as reasonably practical to determine their relationship with the franchisor, whether they would buy that franchise if they had to do it over again, and you can ask them all kinds of questions. It's a little bit unusual, but you can actually call franchisees and assist in a particular franchise system, tell them that you're looking to buy a franchise from that franchisor, and they will generally provide you with a lot of good information, including financial information that's going to be helpful for you to decide whether you're going to buy that franchise, whether you can afford that franchise, and things of that nature. The first thing the franchisor is going to ask you to do is to fill out an application with a financial statement so that the franchisor can qualify you to see if you are an appropriate franchisee for that system. So the relationship goes both ways. At the same time you are doing your due diligence on the franchisor needs to do some due diligence on you. After you receive the franchise disclosure document, at some point, if you are still interested, the franchisor is going to invite you to their headquarters and have what's called Discovery Day. Discovery Day is when you get to meet a lot of the franchise operations people. Keep in mind, up until that time, you've been dealing with the franchisor's salespeople. Those are not the people that you're going to be dealing with if you go forward and sign a franchise agreement. So at Discovery Day, the franchisor will usually introduce you to the operations people, and you want to be comfortable with the culture and the integrity of the people that you meet at the franchisor's headquarters. And finally, if the process goes well and you're still interested in the franchise and the franchisor is still willing to grant you a franchise, then you will ultimately have a quote closing, at which time you will sign the franchise agreement. Let's talk a few minutes about the franchise agreement itself and what is or is not negotiable in a franchise agreement. First of all, you have to understand that the franchise agreement is always going to be one-sided in favor of the franchisor. Now, there's some good reasons why that is, because a franchisor needs to control to a large extent how each franchisee in the system operates their business. Because the goal of a franchise system is to have uniformity throughout the system, so that when I go to a McDonald's in Boca Raton, Florida, and I go to a McDonald's in San Diego, California, I will have the same experience, the same products and services, etc. So that's the goal of most franchise systems, is to have uniformity throughout the country, or throughout the world if they're expanding internationally. The more established franchisors who have been in business for a long time will typically not negotiate the terms of the franchise agreement. So it's a take it or leave it proposition. You do need to understand the consequences of signing that agreement. In a newer franchise system, the franchise agreement may be negotiable. Some of the provisions that you're going to want to review carefully in a franchise agreement are the size of the territory and what territorial protections you may get, whether or not you're going to have to sign a personal guarantee and the scope of that personal guarantee, the restrictive covenants both during the term of the franchise agreement and after the franchise agreement is terminated or expires, and liquidated damages provisions. Finally, today I want to talk about the franchisor-franchisee relationship and what may go wrong. So some of the disputes that franchisors and franchisees have revolve around territories, territorial exclusivities, and what they call encroachment, where one franchisee or a corporate store might encroach on your territory and affect adversely your business. Keep in mind that in all franchise systems, the franchisor will control what products and services you will be permitted to offer, and you will be required to offer everything that the franchisor tells you you must offer. One of the biggest areas of contentions between franchisors and franchisees comes about when the franchisor requires a franchisee to purchase certain products from either the franchisor or from sources designated by the franchisor. And when those prices are higher than the prices that the franchisee could buy the same goods in the open market, that's going to be a problem for the franchisee. Another problem is where the franchisor receives kickbacks or rebates or other payments from these designated suppliers and uses all those funds for the benefit solely of the franchisor. One of the advantages to buying a franchise, you would think, would be the bulk discount purchasing that you would be able to enjoy. Well, if the franchisor takes that away from you, then they've taken away one of the biggest advantages of buying a franchise. So when you read the franchise disclosure document, you want to see how the franchisor uses any rebates or kickbacks or other payments they receive from the required purchases, and you would hope that they would either return that money to the franchisee that purchased the product, or at least use those monies for the franchisor's marketing or website or other ways that will benefit all of the franchisees in the system. This concludes this session on buying a franchise in the United States. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me via email or visit our website, franchiselaw.com.